There's no doubt about it, I'm definitely an early bird. And for years now, we've heard people extol the virtues of getting up at 5 a.m. Whether it's books like Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning, Dan Luca's 5 a.m. Revolution, or former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink religiously posting a photo of his wristwatch to Instagram at 4:30 a.m. every day, we're told that the early bird catches the worm. Or at least, that's what we're led to believe. We're led to believe that the early bird is more disciplined, that the early bird works harder, and therefore the early bird deserves to succeed. And there's some anecdotal evidence to this. Sir Richard Branson wakes up at 5 a.m. every day. Twitter's Jack Dorsey gets up at 5:30 a.m. each day and walks the 8 kilometers to the office. And about 90% of executives identify as being early risers. Although, that could just be signaling. But is this all true? Is the early bird really more disciplined, really more hardworking, and more likely to succeed? Well, according to science, getting up at 5 a.m. and commencing work shortly thereafter could actually be doing more harm than good for about half of the population. In fact, it could be killing a lot of us. In this episode, I'm going to explore why human beings are either early birds or night owls, how to identify which one you are, and how to plan your day accordingly to get the best out of yourself. Before I get into that, if you like this show, take a moment to like, share, or subscribe, and leave a comment below. Are you a night owl or an early bird? And when do you find yourself doing your best work? Now, it turns out that our preferred sleeping patterns, or our chronotypes, are programmed at birth. Astrophysicist Sabrina Stierwalt wrote for Scientific American that our preferences for one or the other are encoded in genes called clock or period genes that regulate our circadian rhythms and are linked to our blood pressure, metabolism, body temperature, and hormone levels. This is according to research carried out by Gyolyan Ding and her team of researchers on the central circadian clock and how it regulates energy metabolism. Now, if you think about the traditional workday, it's 9 to 5. So if the rules of the game are skewed in your favor because, say, you're an early bird, then of course, you're more likely to win. Whereas if you're a night owl, you can actually experience a form of social jet lag when you're forced to start work at 9 a.m., say a couple of hours after you wake up. In fact, night owls have been shown to be more productive about 10 hours after waking up, whereas early birds tend to be more productive a couple of hours after waking up. That social jet lag that night owls experience is not too dissimilar to what you might experience after an overnight flight. A study published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences had researchers observing over 700 people who showed a split in personality traits between night owls and early risers. Early birds tended to be more persistent and resistant to frustration and showed lower levels of anxiety, whereas night owls were braver but more likely to develop addictive habits. Now, several studies have found that about 30 to 45% of the population are indeed night owls. And so the 9 to 5 workday is effectively sabotaging the best efforts and the potential of almost half of the population. And that's not the only thing. According to a study by Kristen Knudsen, published in Chronobiology International, diminished productivity might not be the only downside for night owls. They face a 10% higher risk of earlier death than early birds. In his best-selling book, Why We Sleep, Matt Walker found that lack of sleep results in a 60% increase in emotional reactivity. With a full night of sleep, we have what Matt Walker calls balance between our emotional gas pedal, our amygdala, and the brake, our prefrontal cortex. Without enough sleep, the strong coupling between these two regions is lost. Walker also says that healthy people can experience a neurological pattern of brain activity similar to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder if they have their sleep disrupted or blocked. Not only that, but insufficient sleep can also lead to an early onset of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, due to a collection of amyloid beta plaques in the brain. Now, earlier I presented some anecdotal evidence about early risers succeeding in the world. Now, here's the thing about anecdotal evidence. You can often very easily find anecdotal evidence to the contrary. For example, Mark Zuckerberg told Jerry Seinfeld in a live Q&A that he routinely gets up at 8 a.m. Hardly an early bird. BuzzFeed CEO Jonah Peretti routinely sleeps in until about 8:30 a.m. New Yorker journalist Catherine Schultz told Business Insider that her writing brain doesn't usually kick in until about 10 p.m. So she finds herself doing her best writing in the wee hours of the morning. Aaron Levi, CEO of Box, usually gets up at about 10 a.m. And Alexis Ohanian, founder of Reddit and husband to tennis superstar Serena Williams, usually hits the sack at 2 a.m. and doesn't get up until about 10 a.m. And what the hell, I'll give you one more. One of my favorite authors of all time, Hunter S. Thompson, would normally settle into writing at midnight, albeit in his case, aided by a daily diet of burgers, drugs, and alcohol. Something I cannot vouch for on this show. So how do you know which one you are, early bird or night owl? Well, fortunately, there's a test you can take online called the Automated Morningness Eveningness Questionnaire, or the Auto MEQ. It takes only about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, and it will tell you whether you are more inclined to work in the morning or later in the day. I took the test myself and scored a 75. Definitely a morning person. Now, the test will give you some additional insights, such as when your brain will begin to release melatonin and when your natural bedtime is. As you can see on the screen, based on my responses, my brain starts to release melatonin at about 7:30 p.m. and my natural bedtime is about 10:15 p.m. And this is pretty much true. More often than not, I find myself powering down between 9:30 and 10 p.m. and by 10:15 p.m. I am well and truly on my way to La La Land. So what do you do once you know whether you're an early bird or a night owl? How does this apply to your work? Well, if you're an early bird, you might want to front load more of your deep work. Block out time in your day early in the morning to do the stuff that requires deeper thinking, whether it's writing an article, whether it's coding, whatever your line of work happens to be. If you're a night owl, you do the opposite and do more of that work in the afternoon and evening. Now, this is especially true if you work for a company, if you work with other people and you have standard 9 to 5 hours. Whatever you can do to backload that deeper thinking, that deep work, is going to help you as a night owl. Now, of course, the pandemic accelerated a lot of trends, including remote work. And as more organizations embrace remote work, the hope is that more of them will embrace asynchronous communication as opposed to the hyper-responsiveness, the back-to-back Zoom calls, the constant checking of email that plagues today's workday. And when we embrace asynchronous communication, it gives more people to work the hours that suit them, which means that night owls don't need to start work at 9 a.m. They can in fact start work later in the day, perhaps at midday or even 2 p.m. in a way that suits their biological clock, their chronotype, their circadian rhythm the best. And if you'd like to learn more about getting better at remote work, I've published a 60-page ebook called the Remote Work Playbook, which you can download at steveglaveski.com/downloads. I'll have a link in the description for your convenience. Okay, so waking up at 5 a.m. isn't complete bullshit, but neither is waking up at 5 p.m. It really depends on your own chronotype, the work you're doing, and the environment you're doing it in. So let's stop demonizing people for waking up at 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Instead, if we're going to demonize anything, let it be people not living up to their potential, whether they're early birds or night owls. Before I go, if you want to get these insights while you're in the gym, while you're going for a walk or a run, when you're in your car, whatever the case is, you can also find this show on Spotify. Just search for Workflow with Steve Glaveski. Until next time.